So you want to play as the Empyrean in your next game? They were one of the 7 factions that were added in the Prophecy of Kings expansion, and in this expansion they also added space exploration by using these frontier tokens. So if your inner child is named Ferdinand Magellan, this ship was the first one to sail around the world. Unfortunately, he didn't make it himself, but don't worry, we will fare better in this video. As mentioned, this faction is all about space exploration, and we have 2 game mechanics that help us with exactly that. First, we got our starting tech called Dark Energy Tab, which allows us to explore those frontier tokens. And if you want to learn more about this technology, you can watch this short video here. Then we have our agent that gives us a command token back after we have activated an empty system. So basically we can explore 1 frontier token for free every round. So what can we get from exploring? Well, just to name a few, we can get command tokens, we can get action cards, we can get trade goods, we can find a gamma wormhole so we get access to Malice, or we can even find a new legendary planet called Mirage. Both the faction in general and the first round is fairly straightforward for the Empyrean. There are no immediate problems that we need to solve, but there are quite a few things we want to achieve in the first round. First of all, we want to gain control of 2 new systems. We want to explore 1 frontier token. We want to become neighbors with 2 other players, both so we get closer to unlocking our commander, and I will talk more about him later in the game. But we also want to give out our promissory notes, Dark Pact and Bloodpact, and especially the Dark Pact we want to give out early in the game. And then lastly, in the first round, we want to produce some units in our home system. So let's get started. When we are in the strategy phase, where each player selects a strategy card, we want to go for the trade strategy card. But before picking it, let's have a quick chat with our potential neighbors and hear if they're interested in trading with us. Also because we have this Dark Pact promissory note, and that gives us essentially 1 extra trade good both for us and for that player, in case he trades all his commodities with us. I don't think we can sell the promissory note to another player because we gain the same value, both of us, but at least it can help us make an ally, because if that other player decides to activate one of our systems, then he has to give back the promissory note, and then we cannot gain that extra trade good. If we take a look at our starting units, we can see we start with 2 carriers, 4 infantry, 2 fighters and 1 destroyer. And this is enough to fly out and gain control of 2 systems in the first round, which is completely fine. 1 is too little, and more is of course a little bit better, well, usually at least. And also note that our home system is placed in a nebulae. There are special movement rules for all other factions in nebulaes, and that means that they can still fly into one, but not through. And when they want to exit it again, their movement is reduced to 1. But these rules does not apply to the Empyrean because of their Voidborn faction ability that simply states nebulae do not affect your ship's movements. And the best part is that if we ever need to defend our home system, then we can apply +1 to all our die rolls because we are defending in a nebulae. Alright, let's have a look at how the first round can go. And before we fly out with our carriers, we could consider flying out here to this beta wormhole with our destroyer, so that we get to explore this frontier token. And we get an unknown relic fragment by doing so. And then we can exhaust our agent and get a token back. And this also makes us neighbors with the green player, and that means that we can give him the Dark Pact promissory note. And we want to do this early because he needs to use an action to put this card in his play area, and he needs to do that before we play the trade strategy card, so that we both get the extra trade good whenever he trades all his commodities with us. And if you want to learn more about the trade strategy card, you can watch a video up here. So now it's the green player's turn, as we can see on the initiative number, and he decides to play the Dark Pact promissory note as an action. And when it gets to be us, we can actually already now play the trade strategy card, because that will be an advantage for us, because we will gain some trade goods, and then we can build on the secondary of warfare whenever the green player decides to play that. And that's a good thing, because then we can produce some units in our home system without locking it down, and that means that those units can also fly out in round 1. The first thing that happens when we play the trade strategy card is that we gain 3 trade goods, so let's take those. And then we get to replenish our commodities. We have 4 of those here. And then we can choose any number of other players and they will also have their commodities replenished. And since we already agreed with the green player that we want to do trades with him, let's quickly replenish him. And now for the Dark Pact promissory note to take effect, he has to give us all of his commodities, so we can get an extra one, and we will convert those to trade goods on the way back. And let's just say we make a 3 for 3, and then he also earns an extra trade good the other way around. For the Empyrean player, there are a lot of different options on how to spend the resources in the first round, and there are at least 3 unknowns to count for. First of all, how many trade goods do we get from trading with another player? And second, what do we find when we explore the frontier token? We could be unlucky to find an enigmatic device. It will allow us to research one technology for 6 resources, but that's a lot in the first round. We could also be more lucky to find a Chimera ship that will provide us with 2 command counters, or maybe even a large entropy field that will give us 1 command counter and 3 trade goods. And we can of course use this to do more exploration, and we have resources to build units for. And thirdly, is the technology card even in play in this round? Because if it's not, then we are not able to research any technology. Well, of course, unless we find that enigmatic device and are filthy rich, then we can. But if you are unsure what to do with the resources, I will always recommend producing more units over researching technology in case I have to choose between the two. So let's say we only have the 3 resources in our home system and 3 trade goods to trade with. And in that case, I will then spend those 6 resources on building 2 mechs, 1 destroyer and 2 infantry, which is the maximum number of units we can build on this space dock. And we will use the destroyer to explore more frontier tokens. The infantry will initially defend our home system, and the mechs will be transported out along with our carriers. So we want to move these out as late as possible so that we can get our mechs out to the front line. And if we were lucky to get more resources, either by exploring or if we actually did a trade, then I would use those extra resources to either research a technology or save the trade goods for later rounds. And now it's time to move our carriers out. So as our third action, we can activate out here and move a carrier and possibly 2 infantry out there. Because at this point in the game, the warfare player may not have played his card yet, so we may not have produced the mechs and the infantry and the extra destroyer. And as our 4th action, we can activate out here. And now we have probably produced these units on the secondary of warfare, and we will bring our mechs along so we can get them to the front line, which is very important for the Empyrean. Not because they are particularly strong, but because they can cancel any action card that is played by a player that is either in or adjacent to one of the systems where one of our mechs are. So let's say that the green player decides to attack our dreadnought in this system here, and he makes a hit. So we have to sustain damage on the dreadnought. Then he plays a direct hit action card, and that would normally destroy it. But because we have a mech in the system as well, then we can remove that and cancel that action card. And in this way we get to keep our dreadnought. And note that we can even cancel action cards played between 2 other players as long as we have a mech in or adjacent to the player who plays the action card, and that can be worth a lot. So let's say that the yellow player needs this planet to score a public objective. So he moves in with a decent fleet and he quickly wipes out the cruiser here. And when he wants to land his units on the planet, then the green and defending player plays the parlay action card that says after another player commits units to land on a planet you control, return the committed units to the space area. And that means that this single infantry that would probably have lost the ground combat remains safe because those 4 infantry stays on the carrier. But we will tell the yellow player that we have a mech here, so we can actually cancel this action card by removing one of the mechs so that he can still score his public objective. So we offer him to remove one of our mechs to cancel these action cards, but in return we want his support for the throne, and that will basically give us a victory point, at least until we may have to activate one of the yellow player's systems. And in this way the yellow player gets his victory point, we get a victory point, but we could of course also negotiate about trade goods or something third. When it comes to technology, we have a few must-haves, but after we have gotten those, then we can go as far into the blue tech tree as we like. We start with Dark Energy tab, which allows us to explore those frontier tokens. But if we have any asteroid fields either in or near our slice, then we need anti-mass deflectors to be able to fly in or fly through those systems so we can explore those frontier tokens. Then we can go for gravity drive, and this will basically give +1 movement to one of our units whenever we move one of our fleets, and this will allow our carriers to catch up with our destroyers and our cruisers. So this is always helpful to have. And if you want to learn more about gravity drive, you can watch a short video here. If we research a blue technology, then we'd also open up for our Aetherstream faction technology. It says, after you or one of your neighbors activates a system that is adjacent to an anomaly, you may apply +1 to the move value of all of that player's ships during this tactical action. And then on this map here, it actually means that we can fly all the way to Megatol Rex because it is adjacent to this supernova. So our destroyers that can normally only fly 2 systems can now fly 3. Or we could also activate the other end of this alpha wormhole because we have the entry here. So again, 1, 2, and 3. So this technology makes it extremely helpful for us in case we want to explore these frontier tokens that are on the other side of the galaxy. Instead of going for gravity drive, we can also go into the green tech tree and research neural motivator. This technology will give us 2 action cards instead of 1 in every status phase. So getting this technology as early as possible will give us the most benefit. And going into the green tech tree will also open the path for one of our faction technologies called Voidwatch. And what this basically does is that every time another player decides to move his ships into one of our systems with one or more of our units, he has to give us a promissory note from his hand, which can be very powerful. So let me demonstrate. So let's say that we have just flown into this system here and gained control of Lodor, and now the green player decides to activate the very same system and fly some units in because he's also interested in getting this system. But because we have the Voidwatch technology, then he also has to give us a promissory note from his hand. So he decides to give us his trade agreement, which is nice. Thank you for that. But there is also a synergy with our commander here. So if that is unlocked, after another player moves ships into a system that contains one of your command tokens, you may return that token to your reinforcements. So we can basically remove this one again, put it back in our reinforcements. And if our ships survive this space combat, then they're actually free to fly out once more. And lastly, having 1 blue and 1 green technology allows us to research Fighter 2, and these are optimal to use to explore those frontier tokens further into the galaxy. And that's because they are dirt cheap to produce, they defend better than destroyers, they don't need transportation to where they get to be, and they have movement too. When we initially fly out and explore all of these frontier tokens, we actually want to leave our units in those empty systems, because if we plan ahead, then we can have a look at the hero. It says it's an action. Place 1 frontier token in each system that does not contain any planets and does not already have a frontier token. Then explore each frontier token that is in a system that contains one or more of your ships. So we want to leave all of our units in these empty systems as much as possible because we don't want to fly out and occupy these systems again when we play the hero. So when we actually do that, then we get all the frontier tokens back and we get to do all of the exploration once more. If one or more of the other players get annoyed that we have units spread all over the galaxy, then they can of course always attack us. But if we have the Voidwatch technology, then they will have to give us a promissory note. But ultimately, 2 fighters in a given system is not exactly a threat to anyone. We don't even have any ground forces with us, so we cannot invade any planets. But if they still think we are in the way, then we can always allow them to fly through our systems because we have the faction ability called Aetherpassage. And in the early game, I would be very generous to do that, simply because we want to keep our units in those empty systems, so that when we play the hero, then we can explore all those frontier tokens once more. And then later in the game, after playing the hero, we can become a little more greedy with it and try to negotiate, for instance, a trade good, or simply say no to block any other players from coming through. But we can also be the devil himself, because the timing window for the Aetherpassage is after activation. So let's say that the other player asked us beforehand if he could fly through one of our systems, and we said yes. Then that agreement is not binding because we couldn't use our ability at that exact point in time. So when he activates and puts the command token in the system, we can actually change our mind and then say, no, you cannot fly through anyway. And in this way, he will not just lose his command token, but probably also whatever he wanted to do, that he won't be able to do again in this game. Just bear in mind that if you do this, then the other players will probably not make any more deals with you, either in this game or in any future games. In my opinion, these technologies are the vital one for the Empyrean player to get. So after getting these, then I will go further into the blue tech tree and get lightweight deflectors, for instance, so our ships can fly through other players' ships. That will open up a lot of options in the end game and possibly give us the victory. And I would also go for fleet logistics so that we can get to do 2 actions in every turn. So let me know in the comments below what your favorite Empyrean technologies are. Earlier I demonstrated the first round with the trade strategy card, so now let's have a look at the alternatives. We could consider to take the technology card so that we get to research the technology for free. I wouldn't spend the 6 resources on researching a second one though. Let's say that our destroyer needs to fly 3 systems away to become neighbors with the holder of our Dark Pact promissory note. Often wormholes can open up for more players to become neighbors with, and not just the 2 to our left and right. Because if we need to do this, then we can research Gravity Drive for free in round 1 and then reach that faraway neighbor. Politics is also an option for us. We will get the speaker token, and that means that we can pick strategy cards as the first one in the next round. But besides that, we also get 2 action cards, and we get to look at the top 2 agendas in the agenda deck. And if you want to learn more about the politics strategy card, I'll put a link to that video up here. We could also go for the leadership strategy card, and with this card we will gain 3 command tokens, and we can also buy even more by spending 3 influence per command token. But I don't think we should do that. I think it's better to use the 3 resources on our home system to produce even more units. So we can play this card as our very first action, because this will prevent most of the other players of doing the secondary, where they can spend 3 influence to buy 1 command token. And in this way it's only us who will gain anything from this card in the first round. And then as our second action we could fly out here with our destroyer and explore this frontier token, and we will also exhaust our agent and get 1 token back like this. Then we can, if we want, give the green player the Dark Pact promissory note so that we gain those extra trade goods. And as our third action we can activate out here and move a carrier with 2 infantry out there to gain control of these 2 planets. And it is likely that the warfare player decides to play that card now, so we can do the secondary of that, which is to produce units in our home system. So we spend 1 command token from our strategy pool, and then we have 3 resources to build for. So I would build 2 infantry and 2 destroyers with that. And if we had any more trade goods, then I would probably also build a mech. And we will use these destroyers to explore more frontier tokens. So let's do that as our next action. So we fly out here and explore this one. And of course we needed to pay for the 3 resources. And as our 5th and last action, we can activate out here and fly out with a carrier, 2 infantry, a fighter, and possibly also a destroyer. Because then in the next round, if we have anti-mass deflectors, we can go here, or we can go all the way to the alpha wormhole over there in the next round. So with the leadership strategy card, I would definitely use those extra command tokens to explore more frontier tokens so that we get the extra benefits early in the game, and we also get to use our hero early as well. Out of the 4 strategy cards I've just demonstrated, I still think the trade one is by far the best one. The other 3 also help us a little bit, but it doesn't really do anything extra for the Empyrean. So I would always go for the trade strategy card whenever I can get my hands on them. Next I will talk about our second promissory note called Bloodpact, and a really strong combination between our Flagship and Dreadnought 2s. So let's have a look at that. Our other promissory note Bloodpact doesn't really have any synergies with the Imperial's other faction abilities, but what it does give us is 4 extra votes if we and another player can agree on the same outcome of an agenda. If we can make a deal with the player who has the most influence, then the 2 of us can probably dominate the agenda phase, but I think it's very situational and hard to predict how useful it will be in a given game. But at least this promissory note will make us an ally, not a solid one, and maybe not for that long, but still an ally for now. If we get to build our flagship, it could be that the public objective Engineer Marvel comes out. It simply says have your flagship or Warzone on the board. Then it could be interesting to go for the Dreadnought 2 unit upgrade, because it says this unit cannot be destroyed by direct hit action cards, and that means that we can safely sustain damage on one of our units without risking losing it. And what our flagship can do is to repair units by spending 2 influence. The flagship just needs to be either in or adjacent to the units that needs to be repaired. and getting Dreadnought 2 requires 2 blue technologies that we will get anyways, so we only need to find either a blue tech skip planet or maybe research Sarween tools. If you found this video useful, then please consider giving it a like, and you can also subscribe to my channel by either clicking on the logo here or the button below. That will help me a lot, so thank you if you do. And you can also watch more content here.